I didn't even want to go to therapy in the first place. It was my sister who pushed me into it after I spiraled post-breakup. She gave me that look, the one that somehow said I love you and you're being a dumbass at the same time, and sent me a link to a counseling service. I didn't expect much. I figured I'd talk about my ex, pretend I was fine, and be out of there in 6 weeks max. But then I met Evan. Evan was not what I imagined a therapist would be like. He looked like someone who played guitar in a coffee shop on weekends. Button-downs always rolled up to the elbows, dark-rimmed glasses, soft-spoken but not in that fake, I'm listening way. More like he was actually there. It threw me off from day one. At first, we kept things clinical. He asked questions. I gave half-honest answers. I stuck to my script, talked about my trust issues, my history with dating people who only loved me when it was convenient, the usual damage. But week after week, Evan pushed back. Gently, patiently. He never told me what I wanted to hear, and weirdly, I liked that. I started saying more, and he listened in a way that made me feel like I wasn't just ranting into the void. Somewhere around our third month of sessions, I caught myself dressing better on therapy days. It was stupid. I'd sit on his couch and tell myself this is professional while adjusting my collar like it mattered. Every time our eyes locked a second too long, I'd pretend I hadn't noticed. One afternoon, after a session that had me unpacking some pretty raw stuff about how my last boyfriend cheated and then blamed me for not being exciting enough, Evan sat forward in his chair instead of doing the usual "our time's up" thing. "Do you ever get coffee after these?" he asked. I blinked. "What?" He smiled, almost sheepish. "I just mean, after a heavy session like that, sometimes a change of space can help. I know a place around the corner, low-key." I stared at him, trying to read the room. Was this part of the process? Some weird exposure therapy thing? "Are you allowed to do that?" I asked. He hesitated. "Technically, no. Therapists aren't supposed to cross certain lines with clients, which is why I'm bringing this up now." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, so why ask? His gaze didn't waver. "Because I like talking to you, and I've realized I want to know who you are outside this room, not just as a client." I didn't say anything for a long time. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat, unsure if I should run or stay or laugh or throw up. He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking unsure of himself for the first time. "I understand if this makes things uncomfortable. If you want to switch therapists, I'll make that happen. No questions asked." But I didn't want to switch, and I didn't want to leave. That was the worst part. I wanted to go with him. The rest of that day felt unreal. I kept replaying Evan's voice in my head. "I like talking to you. I want to know who you are outside this room." It wasn't just what he said. It was the way he said it. Calm, careful, but unmistakably real. There wasn't a trace of therapy jargon or vague emotional coaching. It was just him. I didn't respond that afternoon. I just left. I mumbled something like, "I'll think about it," and walked out of his office trying to look composed while internally short-circuiting. When I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed with my coat still on, staring at the floor like it was going to give me answers. Here's the thing. I knew this was a bad idea. I wasn't an idiot. Everything about it screamed boundary issues, ethical disaster, this could really mess you up. But underneath the alarms in my head was something louder, something hungrier, a part of me that felt seen. Not the way friends see you or family pretends to, but really seen. And honestly, it felt damn good. 3 days passed, no sessions, no emails, no follow-ups. I kept telling myself it had been a moment of weakness on his part. Maybe he regretted saying it, maybe I was reading into it too much. But then Friday came. I was sitting on my couch, half watching some Netflix garbage, when I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Evan. If you want to pretend that never happened, I get it. But I'll be at Café Luna around 6. You don't owe me anything. Just wanted to put that out there." I stared at the message for a full 10 minutes. I knew Café Luna. It was a little place tucked behind a bookstore, not far from his office. Quiet, kind of hidden, intimate in that accidental way. I'd gone there once before, on one of those post-session walks where I tried to forget everything I'd said aloud. And now he wanted to meet there. As not my therapist, I should have said no I didn't. By 5:45, I was already there, pacing outside the place like some lost tourist. The sun was setting, bleeding orange through the trees, and I felt like I was about to make a decision I couldn't undo. I stepped inside and spotted him almost instantly. He was sitting near the back, hoodie instead of blazer, hair slightly messy like he hadn't had time to style it. When he looked up and saw me, he smiled. Not that calm therapist smile, but something warmer, realer. I walked over, pulse in my throat. He stood up, awkward, like he didn't know if he should shake my hand or hug me or just sit back down. I took the lead and slid into the seat across from him. Neither of us spoke for a moment. "You came," he said finally. I nodded. "Apparently." He laughed under his breath, then looked down at his hands. "I wasn't sure if you would." "I wasn't sure either." Silence again, but not uncomfortable. Just heavy. "I should say this again," he said, lifting his eyes to mine. "You don't owe me anything. If this was a mistake, I'll never bring it up again. You can ghost me, file a complaint, whatever you need to do." Do people usually go that route when their therapist asks them out? I asked before I could stop myself. He winced. "I didn't say I was asking you out." "No?" I raised an eyebrow. "What was this then?" He hesitated. A moment of honesty. I crossed a line I shouldn't have. But the thing is, I meant it. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to challenge him, push back, make him explain how he could sit there for months, pretending this was just professional, while maybe wanting something else. But the bigger part, the one that was just tired of pretending, didn't want to fight. So instead, I said the only thing I really meant. I wanted to come. He looked up, surprised. I added quickly, I didn't know what to expect, but I wanted to see you. His posture softened, like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. We talked for an hour. Nothing heavy. No trauma dumps, no therapy light. Just regular stuff. Favorite music, worst first dates, how he used to play in a garage band in college. I told him about the time I got lost in Italy and ended up sleeping at a stranger's house who turned out to be a retired opera singer. It was weird how easy it felt. Like we'd done this 100 times before, but never like this. At some point, he looked at me, serious again. "If this goes any further, I can't keep seeing you as a client. You know that, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, I figured." "And that matters," he added. "This isn't just about whatever attraction we might feel. I don't want to screw with your head." "You're not," I said, maybe too quickly. But the truth was, he already had. And I didn't even mind. By the time we stepped out into the night, the air had gone cold. He offered to walk me to my train. We moved in silence most of the way. Close, but not touching. When we got to the corner where I was supposed to turn off, I stopped. So did he. "This feels dangerous," I said, looking up at him. He didn't try to deny it. "Yeah, it does." We stood there for a second. I could feel the tension, that electric line we were both towing. If I leaned in even a little, everything would change. But I didn't. He didn't either. Instead, he said, "I'll call the office Monday. Tell them I'm stepping away from the practice for a while." "Because of me?" He paused. "Because I want to." And that was it. We went our separate ways that night. But that moment, that changed everything. It was weird the days that followed. Like waking up in a version of your life that looked the same but felt just a little off. Like the lighting had changed or the temperature was different. I kept expecting guilt to crash over me, some sense of having crossed a sacred line, but it didn't. Instead, I felt lighter. Still, there was this persistent anxiety in my chest, like I was waiting for the fallout. Maybe someone from his office would call me, say there'd been a mistake. Maybe Evan would change his mind. say the whole thing was impulsive, and he regretted it. Or maybe I'd wake up and realize it was a mistake, and I'd been projecting all of this. But none of that happened. Instead, 4 days later, I got another message. Are you free Saturday night? I was thinking Thai food and a movie that'll probably make us question our existence. I smiled like an idiot just staring at my screen. It was so normal. Not some dramatic declaration, not a tortured ethical breakdown. Just a guy asking if I wanted to spend time with him. And somehow, that made it scarier. I texted back. I like existential dread. Pick me up at 7? He showed up right on time, wearing jeans and a dark gray t-shirt that looked almost aggressively casual. He wasn't trying to impress me, and that made it worse. Or better. I wasn't sure. When I opened the door, he smiled like he wasn't nervous at all, but the way he kept adjusting his keys in his hand said otherwise. You look, he started, then stopped. What? He shook his head, smiling wider. You look like you're not sure if this is a good idea. Yeah, I admitted, but I'm going anyway. We drove to a hole-in-the-wall Thai place he swore had life-altering spring rolls, and I had to admit, he wasn't wrong. We talked about dumb stuff at first. His failed attempts at baking, my childhood obsession with dinosaurs, the fact that neither of us knew how to fold a fitted sheet. It was easy. Effortless. A part of me kept waiting for something to feel off, some hidden agenda to reveal itself, but it never came. After dinner, we headed back to his place. I had never seen where he lived. I'd always imagined him going home to some hyper-minimalist apartment. Clean, impersonal, books stacked by subject, and color-coded. But it was nothing like that. He lived in a third-floor walk-up with mismatched furniture, plants he was clearly trying hard not to kill, and art prints from local painters pinned up with pushpins. It was warm, lived in, real. This is, I said, taking it in. Messy? He offered. No better. He kicked off his shoes and motioned toward the couch. Movie options are pretentious indie drama, or early 2000s. Rom-com. Your call. I picked the rom-com. I needed something simple, something I didn't have to overanalyze. He threw a blanket over us halfway through, and I don't know if it was planned or not, but when our legs touched underneath it, neither of us moved. At some point, I stopped paying attention to the movie. I could feel the warmth of him next to me, the way his shoulder was just barely grazing mine, and it was like my whole body had tuned into that one point of contact. Then, slowly, he shifted, his arm resting behind me on the couch. Casual, but not accidental. I didn't say anything. I didn't look at him, but I leaned into it. After a while, he asked, softly, You okay? I nodded. Are you? He looked at me then. Really looked. I don't think I've been this nervous in years. That surprised me. You don't seem nervous. That's because I'm trying really hard to seem like a grown adult who knows what he's doing. And are you? He laughed quietly. Not even close. The credits started rolling in the background, music swelling, and suddenly we were just sitting there, close, quiet, wrapped in this moment that felt almost too big for the room. I turned toward him slightly. So this is a date? He looked back at me, eyes steady. Do you want it to be? My heart was thudding in my ears. I think it already is. And then, finally, he leaned in. It wasn't rushed or messy. It was slow, deliberate, the kind of kiss that feels more like a question than an answer. His hand cupped the side of my face, thumb brushing my cheek, and I felt myself exhale in a way I hadn't in weeks. Maybe months. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead lightly against mine. Okay, he whispered. That changes things. Yeah, I said, catching my breath. It really does. But I wasn't scared. Not anymore. The weirdest thing about kissing Evan, my former therapist, current, whatever this was how normal it felt. Not in a boring way, not like it was dull or flat, more like it made too much sense, like we'd skipped 10 steps in a script and landed somewhere that should have been awkward or unstable, but instead felt inevitable. I stayed at his apartment that night. Nothing happened. Not in that way. We just lay there, fully clothed, on his couch, under that oversized knit blanket like two people trying not to overthink the fact that the rules had officially shattered. We didn't talk much. I think both of us were afraid to. At one point, I looked over at him, his eyes closed, arm behind his head, the soft rise and fall of his chest. I caught myself memorizing it like I was afraid the moment wouldn't last, like I needed proof later that it was real. And then, because I'm me, I whispered, "So, this doesn't make you a bad therapist, right?" He cracked an eye open. "That depends." On? Whether you're going to write a scathing Yelp review. I smiled, grateful he could still joke. "I'll give you 5 stars, but I might mention the boundary violation." He let out a soft laugh and turned on his side to face me. "I'll take it." The next morning, I woke up before him, still fully dressed, mouth dry, back sore from the couch. I sat up slowly, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do now. Was this a one-time thing? Were we dating? Were we, God forbid, trying something? Before I could spiral, Evan stirred. "Mornin'," he said, voice groggy, one eye barely open. "Hey." We stared at each other for a second, still tangled in that hazy morning air. He sat up too, ran a hand through his messy hair, and said, "I've never done this before." "You mean sleep with your clients on the couch?" He gave me a look. "I didn't say sleep with you." "You're right," I said. "We were very chaste, like nuns." He rolled his eyes and stood up, stretching. "I meant, cross this kind of line." I nodded, more serious now. "Me neither." He turned to face me, arms crossed, suddenly looking more like the Evan I'd first met. "If you want to walk away from this, now's the time. We can stop it before it gets more complicated." I felt that old defensive instinct creep up, the one that wanted to bolt whenever things got emotionally heavy, but I pushed it down. I looked at him and said, "I don't want to walk away." His expression softened. "Good. Because I don't either." We didn't define anything that day. We just kept going. I stopped seeing him as my therapist, officially. He called the clinic, referred me to someone else in the practice, and stepped down. He even offered to recuse himself before I asked, which honestly made it easier to trust what we were doing. We went slow, texting at first, then dinner, then more nights at his place, still tame, still cautious, like we were trying to learn each other all over again, now without the walls of professionalism between us. But even with the formalities gone, I could still feel it, that emotional intimacy that started in the office and carried over into everything, like the foundation had been poured long ago, and now we were just building on top of it. He'd still ask questions that made me pause, still notice when my walls crept back up, still call me out when I got too good at pretending I was fine. Except now, he'd do it while sitting on my bed, or brushing his hand along mine, or kissing me right after I admitted something I hadn't told anyone else. It was healing, in a way I didn't think I deserved, and maybe that was the part that scared me the most. Then came the dinner with his friend Adam. It was a Friday night, a month after our first date, when Evan suggested we grab dinner with some people from his grad school days. I hesitated. Social stuff always made me nervous, especially now, being introduced not as his client, but as something closer to whatever I was. "You don't have to," Evan said. "Seriously, no pressure." But I wanted to go. Or maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I could be someone's something. Not a secret, not a project, just a guy showing up. So I went. We met them at a cozy wine bar near the university. Adam, a therapist too, was charming in that effortless, knows everything about you without trying kind of way. His wife, Tara, was warm and hilarious. They didn't flinch when Evan introduced me simply as, this is someone special. We laughed, drank too much, told dumb stories about bad dates and worse apartments. At one point, Adam leaned across the table and said, "You've softened him." I blinked. "What?" He nodded toward Evan, who was busy trying to explain why he once kept a dying aloe plant alive for 2 full years out of spite. "He's different," Adam said. "Not worse. Just lighter, it's good to see." And that's when I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until that moment. He wasn't saving me anymore. He wasn't fixing me. He was choosing me, just like I was choosing him. And somehow, that made all the difference. After that dinner with Adam and Tara, things started to shift. Not in a dramatic soap opera way. Nobody stood up in a restaurant and declared their love. No one stormed off. But in all the smaller, realer ways that matter more. Evan started sending me pictures of his lunch when he ate something ridiculous. I started calling him on my way home from work, not even to say anything important, just to hear his voice. He kept a toothbrush in my bathroom. I kept a hoodie of his in my closet. We never sat down and said, "Okay, now we're boyfriends." But at some point, the air around us changed. What we were wasn't temporary anymore. It wasn't some blurry transition from therapy to dating. It was something solid. Still, we didn't tell many people. Evan's coworkers knew he had stepped back from the practice to recalibrate, and I had told exactly one friend, my roommate Wes, who raised an eyebrow so high it nearly escaped his face. "You're dating your therapist?" he asked one night over takeout. "Former therapist," I corrected. And it wasn't like that. We didn't hook up in the office or anything. He chewed, thoughtfully. "You know, for a guy who can barely pick a movie on Netflix, you sure like complicated relationships." I rolled my eyes, but he didn't mean it in a judgmental way. If anything, Wes was just trying to wrap his head around it the way I was still trying to. It's not that I was ashamed. It's just, how do you explain to someone that the person who used to listen to you cry about your inability to trust people is now the person you fall asleep next to? It didn't feel wrong, it just felt personal. Like if we said it out loud too many times, it would lose the fragile balance we'd built. One night, I stayed over at Evan's after a long week. He had just finished reading some dense psychology article and was half asleep on the couch when I walked in with 2 burritos and a 6-pack. "Am I the best boyfriend ever? Or am I the best boyfriend ever?" I said, tossing the bag on the coffee table. He didn't move. "You're not even gonna fake enthusiasm?" I asked. He tilted his head, eyes still closed. "I'm conserving energy. For the burrito." I sat beside him and cracked open a beer, watching him through the corner of my eye. "Is this weird for you yet?" I asked, surprising both of us. He opened his eyes. "Is what weird?" "This," I said, gesturing around us. "Us. Not being client and therapist. Just people." He looked at me for a long second, then sat up straighter. "Can I be honest?" "Only if you lie to me afterward." He smiled. "It was weird at first. I spent weeks thinking I'd ruined my career and yours." "You think I had a career?" I joked. "I'm serious," he said. "I kept waiting for the moment I'd wake up and realize I crossed a line I couldn't come back from, that I'd lost your trust." My smile faded. "You didn't. I know," he said. "I believe that now." But it took time. There was something raw in his voice, something that pulled me closer to him without even thinking. "You helped me," I said quietly. "But you're not my therapist anymore. Now you're just Evan, and I like that version too." He blinked a few times like he was trying to file those words away somewhere deep. Then he reached for my hand. "I like being just Evan," he said. "With you." The only time things got hard was when we ran into someone from his old clinic. We were walking through a farmer's market one weekend, Evan in sunglasses and a hoodie, me carrying a tote bag full of overpriced vegetables we were never going to cook, when a woman called out from behind a booth. "Evan?" He turned, and his whole body tensed. The woman smiled, polite but curious. "I thought that was you. How've you been?" "Good," he said, then added, "Taking a break from work. Just needed to reset a bit." She glanced at me. "And who's this?" I offered my hand. "I'm—" "An old friend," Evan said quickly, cutting me off. My hand dropped before she could take it. The conversation ended quickly after that. She moved on. We moved on. But the damage sat between us for the rest of the walk. "You didn't have to do that," I said once we were out of earshot. "I know," he replied. I panicked. "Do you think I'm a secret?" He stopped walking. No, God, no. I just didn't want to invite questions we weren't ready to answer. I nodded, trying not to let the knot in my chest expand. It's not like we're doing anything wrong. We're not, he said, but that doesn't mean people won't see it that way. I don't care what people see. He looked at me then, soft and serious. I do. That stayed with me the rest of the day. And not in a good way. Later that night, he pulled me into his arms in the kitchen, back pressed against his chest while I was loading the dishwasher. I'm sorry, he said into my neck. For what? For not knowing how to do this. I closed my eyes and leaned into him. Me neither. We stayed like that for a while, quiet, steady, trying to forgive each other for being human. Trying to remember that this wasn't about how it started, it was about what we were building now, together. By the time fall rolled around, we were in that unspoken stage where everything felt like a relationship, even if we hadn't used the word officially. Evan had stopped dodging questions when people asked who I was, at least most of the time. I wasn't a secret anymore. Not to his friends, not to the barista at his favorite coffee spot, not to the doorman who gave me a wink the last time I buzzed up alone. But there was still one line we hadn't crossed, one part of this whatever we are, that sat untouched, like the last piece of cake nobody wants to be the first to take. We hadn't slept together. I don't mean sleep, like the literal kind. We'd done plenty of that. I'd spent more nights tangled in his sheets than my own. But the other thing, the thing everyone assumed had already happened, it hadn't. Not yet. And it wasn't because we didn't want to. That part was obvious every time we kissed a little too long, every time his hands lingered on my lower back, every time I caught the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. No, it wasn't about desire, it was about weight, about history, about knowing that once we crossed that line, there wouldn't be a clean way back. The night it finally happened wasn't dramatic. There were no candles, no romantic playlist, no thunderstorm pounding the windows. It started with laundry. We were folding clothes on his bed, making dumb jokes about the sock monster, when I found one of my shirts in his pile. A shirt I hadn't left there. One I hadn't worn in weeks. You wore this? I asked, holding it up. He glanced over, a little sheepish. Yeah. I missed you. I didn't say anything for a second. Just looked at him. At this man who had once been a stranger holding a clipboard and now folded my underwear without blinking. Is that weird? He asked. No, I said. It's really not. He nodded slowly, eyes dropping to the shirt in my hands. I think about you all the time, he said quietly. Even before this started. I didn't mean for it to happen. But it did, and it scared the hell out of me. I sat down on the edge of the bed, shirt still in my lap. It scared me too, I said. He moved toward me, crouched down in front of where I was sitting, like he used to during our earliest sessions, except now everything was different. I want this, he said. I want you, but not like a secret, not like I'm borrowing something I shouldn't have. I reached for him, hand sliding into his hair. Then take it. Take me. I'm not a secret. He stood slowly, pulling me up with him. And when he kissed me, it wasn't tentative anymore. It wasn't laced with hesitation or what-ifs. It was full. Full of everything we hadn't said, hadn't done, hadn't allowed ourselves to want. He walked me backward toward the bed, never breaking the kiss. And when we finally collapsed together, it wasn't frantic. It was patient, careful, like we were learning each other in real time. We took our time. We made space for every breath, every pause. There was no rush, no performance, just connection. Just hands and mouths and heat and whispered things I wouldn't remember word for word, but would feel for days after. When it was over, when we were lying tangled up in sheets that no longer separated us from anything, we didn't speak for a long time. His fingers traced shapes on my back. My head rested on his chest. The rhythm of his breathing lulled me into something soft and dangerous. This, he said, barely above a whisper. This is real, right? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to give it the weight it deserved. Yeah, I said. It's real. After that, something shifted between us. Not in a bad way. not in a fragile way, but in a way that made everything else feel more possible. We cooked together more, grocery shopped like a couple, started using we without noticing. He left a key on the hook next to mine. He told his sister about me. I told my mom. Well, I told her I was seeing someone. She didn't need the full therapist-turned-boyfriend breakdown just yet, but it felt good to say it, to put it into the world. Still, the road wasn't without its bumps. One night, we had an argument about something stupid: timing, scheduling, a miscommunication about dinner plans. It wasn't loud, but it was tense, sharp. We both retreated into our old defense modes. He got quiet. I got snappy. At one point I said, "I'm not your patient anymore. You don't get to shut down just because I'm upset." He flinched like I'd hit him. I regretted it instantly. "I didn't mean..." "No," he said, holding up a hand. "You're right. I do that. It's how I learned to survive. To keep everything inside." He sat on the couch, staring at the floor. I sat next to him, close but not touching. "I'm scared of losing you," he admitted. "I'm scared of needing you too much," I said. We both laughed a little, because, somehow, they were the same thing. He took my hand, squeezed it tight. "We're gonna mess this up sometimes," he said. "But I want to keep trying. Every damn day." I nodded. "Me too." That night, after things calmed down, we lay in bed facing each other. I watched his eyes flicker in the dark, tracking the ceiling fan like he was counting the rotations. He reached out, brushed his thumb against my cheek. "I love you," he said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even expected, but it was real. And I said it back before I even thought about it. Because I meant it. Because this, whatever this was, whatever it had started as, was no longer about crossing a line. It was about drawing a new one. Together. We used to joke that our story would make a terrible movie. Too quiet, not enough drama, no big betrayal or dramatic reunion at an airport. Just two people who met under complicated circumstances, fell into something neither of them planned, and kept choosing each other every day after that. But the truth is, those kinds of stories, the slow, steady, deeply human ones, stick with you the longest. And ours was exactly that. A few months after we said "I love you" for the first time, Evan found a new job. Different clinic. Different role. He still worked in therapy, but this time he was more behind the scenes, training new counselors, helping build out programs. It was a move he'd been considering for a while, even before us, but now it made sense. I think I needed to believe I could only be good at one thing. He told me one night while we were cooking. "But I can be more than just a therapist. I can be a partner too." "Don't get ahead of yourself," I teased. "Let's see how your pasta turns out first." He flicked water at me. I flicked flour back. It was all very domestic. It wasn't perfect. There were days when I'd fall into one of my moods. Pull back, shut down, pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Evan never pushed, never pried. But he didn't let me hide either. "Just talk to me," he'd say. "You don't have to explain it perfectly, just let me in." And sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. But I always tried. And when it was his turn, when his walls went up, when the emotional exhaustion from his job or life, or just being human caught up with him, I showed up too. Not with solutions, just with space, arms open, light on, waiting. We started doing little things that meant more than I realized at the time. A calendar on the fridge with our schedules. Notes on the mirror when one of us had an early morning. Playlists shared without context. Just songs that made us think of each other. It was quiet. It was intentional. It was love. Then one night, after dinner with some friends, we were walking back to our place, hand in hand, a little buzzed, the air cold but not unbearable, when he stopped on the sidewalk. "What if we moved in together?" he said, totally casual. I blinked at him. "You mean like, fully? No more two places?" He nodded. "I mean, most of your stuff's already at mine. Your toothbrush, your weird slippers, that hoodie I never get to wear anymore." "They're not weird," I said. "They're just aggressively patterned." He laughed. "They're hideous." I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not just the logistics, but what it meant, what we'd been doing, what we were ready for. "Okay," I said. "Okay? Yeah. Let's do it." He kissed me there, on the sidewalk, people walking past us, not even noticing. And for once, I didn't care who saw. Because this was mine. This was ours. Moving in was chaotic. Boxes everywhere. Furniture that didn't fit. Debates over whether his old desk chair was a piece of sentimental value or a cursed object. It was the latter. But when the dust settled, when the last picture frame was hung and the Wi-Fi finally worked, we sat on the floor, backs against the couch, beer bottles in hand, and looked around like we'd built something more than just a shared apartment. "This feels good," I said. He bumped my shoulder. "It feels right." I leaned my head against his. "Remember when you asked me to meet you for coffee outside a session?" "How could I forget? I thought you were going to report me." "I still might," I teased. He turned, looked at me with that steady, quiet warmth I'd come to love. I'd risk it again. That stuck with me. Because for all the hesitation, for all the overthinking, that moment was the beginning of everything. And neither of us ran from it. We leaned in. Carefully. Boldly. Together. If you ask me what we were now, I'd say we're still figuring it out. But we're figuring it out together, and maybe that's the point. Not that love arrives cleanly or perfectly or at the right time, but that it's real when you're both willing to fight for it. One small, honest choice at a time. And I'll keep making that choice. Every single day.